Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is my custom off-road chopper. Today, we're going to be installing a jack shaft and a chain. But first, I have a couple improvements to make. This first improvement comes from Rick over at Busted Knuckle Builds. He reminded me that I should probably put something in between the gas tank and the frame. So I rounded up an old bicycle tube. I cut a couple sections that are just short of my overall length. That way I don't have anything hanging out. And then I butterflied them so that they can open up. I'm going to double them up. Something like that. It's probably easier if we just figure out where the tank's going to go and then set them right over the frame. And then install the tank just like I did before. The second improvement is right up front. I swapped out the hardware for grade 8. I went a little bit longer on the 2 bolts and nylock nuts. We're going to be using these extra threads for something else later on. Now we're going to get down to the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. This is a clutch mount jack shaft. These are used on go-karts where they sit on an existing plate. The engine goes on top, your driver goes on the output shaft, and then you have your jack shaft back here, which supports the pulley. Connect the two with a belt. Well, these are only made with 1/8 inch steel. Since I'm using a flat mount under the engine style jack shaft that's going to go on top of that riser plate, this 1/8 inch isn't going to cut it when we're applying torque to the back wheel. Eventually, this would bend. To prevent that from happening, I made up a 1/4 inch spacer plate. I'm going to go ahead and paint this black and touch this one up. The first step to installing these 2 plates is going to be setting a couple studs for the back 2 holes. These are GX200 Predator 212 layout, so the stud is going to go into the riser plate. This is going to sit on top, and then this one will go on top of that. We'll see what we have left hanging out the top so that we can put an engine on this thing. We're going to be using 3-inch studs. These are just zinc rod, already cut down to size with nice ends on them. These OMB riser plates already have the threaded inserts, so I'm just going to set these down in. We might add a jam nut later on to back up against the bottom of those threads. That way it holds the depth of our stud. The front two are going to be done with bolts from the top. So all said and done, they would go through the block, through the two plates, and then into these inserts. Right now, we're just going to lower our first plate on these back two studs. This is where these little micro slots I did come in handy. In case anything's out of square coming down, you get that little bit of movement to play with, because we're going to be dealing with, 4 separate layers of cyborg meat. These studs and bolts line up directly with the factory mounts for the motor. So no matter what goes on top, we're going to sit square and straight. Same thing goes for the next plate, because this one isn't slotted at all. It's just nice round holes. When this drops on, it's going to sit dead square with those studs. So even if you were a little off on your plate down here, this is still going to be right where you need it to be. Here we are with a block on top of the studs. We can already tell that we're going to need more threads. That is where that jam nut is going to come in handy. The thing is, depending on which engine I choose, this depth could change slightly. So, for now, I'm going to remove the block. I'm going to set 2 bolts in the front holes, and we'll add some nuts and washers in the back just to hold everything in place. We're going to use this nice grade 8 hardware to do the final installation. For now, we just need a couple short skis. I'm finger tight all the way around. I have these set bolts just in the holes with no nut on the bottom yet, but that thing's not going anywhere. We now have 3/8 of steel preventing this jack shaft from bending downward. We're going to be setting this up for a torque converter. It's going to run on this side of the mini bike. We're going to install a 5/8 keyed shaft. We're not going to worry about the pulley and the length coming out this side yet. So I'll set it through, and I'll put a washer and a split collar on the other side. That way we know exactly what we're working with on this end. There's a collar and a small washer on there. Make sure that end is set. You can already see how nice this thing spins. With the split collars, you don't have the compression in towards the bearings that you have on more traditional setups with the threaded shafts. So you're going to get your best bang for your buck doing it this way. Over on this side, we're going to be after the alignment for the chain from the front sprocket to the rear. We're going to go with a 10 and some spacers. Get it as close as I can. I have a shim up against the bearing, a collar, and the sprocket. That should be close enough to get a chain on there. And then we can be a little more exact. We weren't that far off at all. I just had to add a couple washers here. Straight as can be. The closest point of contact is right there, where that gusset is on top of that rear frame section. So, I don't like to run my chains overly tight, and we're not exactly slapping metal, but I think we can do something just to make sure we never do. Alright, here's what I came up with. This is just a cutting board. It's not a super thick cutting board, but it's nice hard plastic. I painted it black, cut some slots in it, and even made a template so we can make another one if this wears out, or we have to double up, or maybe even get a thicker cutting board. A nice 1/4 inch piece would be nice. I have some hardware. And this thing's just gonna go like that. The slots are so that we can move it back in case it does make contact with the chain and it starts to wear. We can gradually get a little more out of it before we have to replace it. This is tightened down in the forward position. We're not making contact yet, but it puts something between our nice chain and the metal underneath. So it's better than not having it. We can adjust it out as we go. The chain should be all right there. Oh yeah, she's smooth. Up next, we're going to install our engine and the rest of our torque converter. Because as always, it's a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.